What is up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be going over how you can beat sweaty players in Fortnite Zero Build. As always, if you guys do find this video helpful or informative, remember to give a like, subscribe, and comment down below what your favorite range to fight players at. Is it long range fights with like the red eye or the DMR, or close range fights with something like the shotgun and SMG? Let me know what your favorite type of fight is down in the comments below. The first thing we're going to have to talk about is putting yourself in better situations. So this is super obvious, but if you're going to be going up against someone who's a good player or a sweaty player, you don't want to start that fight at a deficit already. So if you're finding yourself often in like wide open fields with no cover, it's going to be very easy for a decent player to just pick you apart, or at least get a lot of damage on early in the fight to where you really don't have much of a chance to respond. This can also be avoiding certain locations that are pretty hot. Like this gas station here, there's pretty much always people here. So you probably want to avoid this area if you don't like fighting. And at the very least, if you are fighting here, be very aware of the fact that third parties can happen. Because like I said, if you're going to go against someone decent, you don't want to give them an advantage before the fight even starts. And that, I feel like, is what costs a lot of people fights. Especially in Zero Build, it can be very hard to turn the tides of a fight as with like the red eye in the game. If somebody opens a fight with like 120 damage on you, it's very easy for them to translate that into a kill. So avoid wide open areas, avoid areas where you're just at like a massive disadvantage already. If there's like a hill in zone and you just find yourself at the bottom of it, probably not the best. Those areas that are like just always hot in game probably want to be avoided unless you're confident fighting. And then also another mistake I see a lot of people that kind of ties into this, I see them making, is that they use their mobility just to get around the map, and then they don't have any mobility when they're engaged on. So like the shockwave hammer, for example, only has 3 uses unless you have the mythic one, or the Nimbus cloud, you have 1 use and then a cooldown. So if you hear somebody use all 3 of their hammer dashes, you can go into that fight knowing they probably don't have mobility. Now, maybe they have the mythic and it's good. They'll be able to get out. But more often than not, they don't have that. There's 1 mythic hammer in the game. So use your mobility sparingly. You can use your hammer to get around the map, but always try to save a charge or 2. That way you do have something to respond when a fight does eventually break out if you do get caught off guard. And that brings us to our next point, is when a fight isn't going well, you want to disengage that fight or potentially like reset the fight in some way. But I think the biggest mistake a lot of players make in this regard, and I've seen this happen a lot, is they just try to full run. They don't have any sort of plan in what they're going to do. They're just trying to get away from that fight. And usually what this ends up being is they use their remaining hammer charges. They maybe get to a piece of cover. They maybe just end out in the open because they didn't really have a plan going forward. And even then, if they do get to the cover, they're kind of screwed because you just like keep pressuring them. They're not trying to do anything but run. But what you want to do when you're disengaging a fight is essentially reset the fight. Like if it isn't going well for you, you want to get to a different piece of cover, maybe get some heals off. This is why chug splashes are so good, because you can get them off incredibly quickly and give yourself more of a chance in a fight. And also you can use them while moving. But you want to reset the fight, get to a piece of cover maybe, and then get shots on your opponent. A lot of people are going to chase you, especially those sweaty players. They're usually aggressive. And you want to try to get shots on them to equalize the fight or get some pressure back on them, buying yourself more time to potentially heal or reload your weapons if you're getting third-partied. I'll have a clip on screen here where this fight isn't going well for me, but I don't really have an opportunity to do anything. Like, we're fighting this player. I could have tried to keep running, but if I did that, I wouldn't have gotten any heals off. Instead, I get 2 splashes off, and then I play this tree, and I play the right shoulder peek on this tree to get a good shotgun shot on the opponent. And then the fight's pretty neutral at that point. We're both missing a lot of health, and I just clean up the kill from there. But if all I tried to do was run, and I never tried to actually fight back, or I never got damage back on that opponent, then we surely would have lost that fight. If you don't do any damage to your opponent and you never fight back, you're not giving yourself any chance to win the fight and keep playing the game. So definitely, I think that is the biggest thing a lot of players struggle with when they're in a fight. They're just kind of panicking, and then they don't do anything but run. And then if that's the case, you're either going to get away or you're going to die. There's no way in which you're like eliminating that player. So I think knowing how to disengage and actually reset the fight effectively is a very important skill in Fortnite Zero Build. The next thing we're going to talk about is to not get too tunnel visioned. This will lead to third parties, and this is a bad habit that everyone makes from time to time, and I kind of touched on this before, but I think avoiding third parties is very important in BRs in general, but also if you're going to end up fighting somebody decent, you don't want to give them the advantage going into a fight. So if you are in a fight with somebody, try not to get too tunnel visioned on them. There's nothing really that you can do to stop this other than kind of like consciously try to work on it and be more aware of your surroundings. It's like I said, it's hard to talk about, but it's just something to keep in mind. And this is a mistake that everybody makes from time to time. There's no perfect player in this regard. There's no way in which you're ever going to be perfect and you're not too tunnel visioned and you're always like aware of what's going on around you. BRs are big free-for-alls. You're going to get third-partied sometimes, but just keeping this in mind and being aware of third parties and kind of trying to put yourself in the best situation to where you're not super exposed if third parties do happen can be good, and just building kind of those habits of how you fight in such a way to not get third-partied. Visualize sound effects setting, this is in the audio tab, can also go a long way in helping you not get caught off guard as much or be more aware of your surroundings. I know one thing I've seen a lot of players talk about is how the Nimbus cloud is completely quiet, and that is true, but those players show on visual audio, so even if you can't hear them for whatever reason, the Nimbus cloud will show on visuals. So if you are going to get third-partied by somebody riding in on a Nimbus cloud and then just dropping on you, you will see them on visuals, and that'll make it much easier for you to prepare for that. Just try to keep this in mind when you're fighting. Don't get too absorbed in that fight. Try to be aware of your surroundings, and you will get caught off guard less frequently. Another thing that will help you kind of not get tunnel visioned as much and just help you win fights in the long run is just going to be to get comfortable fighting. I think this is the biggest thing that separates what people refer to as sweats and then just like the average players is the sweaty players are comfortable fighting, they're used to fighting, and they are good at fighting. Whereas the people who aren't sweaty or just like average players, they're not really that comfortable fighting, they're probably not that great at fighting, and they're probably nervous when they're fighting. And this is a huge problem for a lot of players in BRs, because if you have one player that's very confident in the fight and they know how to fight and they're comfortable fighting, and then one player who plays to avoid fights all the time and they're super nervous whenever a fight does break out, I feel like that confident player is going to win 9 times out of 10. And that nervous player is also going to be the one that's more likely to make mistakes, to not disengage properly and just try to run because they're panicking. They're probably super tunnel visioned whenever they're in a fight. There's just so many, like, everything I kind of just talked about, I feel like kind of comes down to being nervous fighting or being panicky fighting. And the sweaty players, or what the community refers to as sweaty players, they're not scared fighting. They're not nervous fighting. And I feel like that is kind of, people don't really know how to articulate it, but I feel like that is what makes someone sweaty, is being aggressive in fights and being comfortable in fights. And the only way you're going to get over that hurdle or that nervousness is to get in more fights. My advice, pretty much I always give to players when they're new players in this game, is to just get in fights. When a BR is new, a lot of people want to win in it, or when someone's new to a BR, they want to win. It makes sense. You know, like that is the ultimate goal in a battle royale. But if you're not comfortable fighting and you're just playing for in-game all the time and you're just playing to hopefully get lucky and maybe third party the last fight and get a win, you can do that somewhat, like it'll work sometimes. But the win isn't really up to you, you know? Things have to fall in line and work out perfectly for you to win. But if you're good at fighting and you're comfortable fighting and you've kind of built the skills to be able to play the game, then you can win, and it is up to you. It's not just going to be like if you get a lucky lobby or you get a really lucky circumstance where like the good players fought and then you just third-partied it. If you get comfortable fighting, you're going to win fights a lot more frequently. You're going to win games a lot more frequently. And I feel like the game is just more fun in general. So try to play in such a way to get kills and get comfortable fighting. If you have 2 hours to play, maybe spend an hour of that, you know, hot dropping and fighting, and then the other hour of that actually trying to play for wins like how you typically do. Or use creative. I think creative is the most efficient tool to improve in this game. I'll have a code in the description down below for the Anvil squared free-for-all map, where it's a zero build free-for-all map where you can just get in a bunch of fights over and over again. And not only is creative good because it's kind of low stress, you know, it doesn't really matter if you die, whereas a battle royale, I feel like there's more stress or more kind of like people care more, you know, if they lose. In creative, you could just die, respawn, kill, die, respawn, kill. You could just do that over and over again. You're getting in those reps so much faster, and you're going to get in so many fights so much faster. And I feel like in general, the players in this map, they're not the best players in the world, but they're average to above average. And if you're a newer player in BR, it's probably going to be harder than your lobbies typically are. But that's good. You're going to get so much more improvement fighting those people that are much better than you and seeing kind of what they do in fights, what their movement is like in fights, and kind of you can practice versus somebody better. I feel like helps make you much better in the long run. So I highly recommend playing creative. I know a lot of players just despise the idea of playing creative, but I think 10 minutes in this Anvil Square free-for-all map would be like equivalent to like 2 hours of playing BR, and just in terms of the amount of fights you can get in and the amount of like benefit you can take from these fights, because you can sit down and you can practice and say, I want to practice like weapon swapping today, and you can get in a lot of reps of trying to do that perfectly, going from your shotgun to your spray weapon back to your shotgun in the perfect amount of time while also tracking the player. Like, the mechanics of close range fighting in this game can be a lot, and Battle Royale is just not a good practice environment because you might spend like 2 to 3 minutes looting, get in your first fight, and then lose, and there's not really much to take from that. But in creative, you can get in so many fights much faster. Easy. It's like way less stress. It doesn't matter if you die. If you get 3 kills and 50 death, who cares? You know what I mean? You just go again. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. And that's why I think creative is just a much better way to practice. And you will see improvement in your gameplay if you do this, and you will be able to beat these sweaty players in Fortnite. So that is my advice to you. The best way to beat sweaty players in Fortnite is to become one. If you guys found this video helpful and informative, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you like some more. Comment down below what type of fight you prefer most, long range or close range, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.